Good evening, everyone. As you know, I started last Sunday speaking about the kingdom of God and the importance of that in the midst of the governmental system that we're in now. And no matter what governmental system that you live in the world in whatever period of time, it still really is all about the kingdom of God. And that's what Jesus came to teach us about. In fact, Jesus talked more about the kingdom of God than he did really any other subject. And in fact, in Matthew chapter 13, several of his parables concerning the kingdom of God are recorded. Now, his teachings are throughout the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but particularly Matthew has several of them bunched up together in Matthew chapter 13, and I would encourage you to read that. He also has a great parable in Matthew chapter 25 that speaks to us today and to look forward to a future time that speaks of both reward and judgment in the kingdom of God, or prior to entering into the kingdom of God. So this evening, what I want to do is just focus on a couple of things that are recorded that Jesus said in Matthew chapter 13, and hopefully get us to be thinking about that a little bit, because that's the purpose of Jesus teaching things in parables. He wanted to cause us to think, to use our mind and our spirit, and to seek his will in the meaning of the parables and the kingdom of God and what that means to us and how we fit into it. In fact, in Matthew chapter 13, in verse 51, it says, after he was teaching, Jesus says this, "Have you understood all these things?" And they said to him, "Yes, Lord." I wonder if they really did understand or not, but that's what they said, "Yes, Lord." Then he said to them, "Therefore, every scribe instructed concerning the kingdom of heaven is like a householder who brings out of his treasure things new and old." I think it's interesting because Jesus is teaching that the kingdom of God, or the kingdom of heaven, as he also referred to it as, it involves teaching both from the Old Testament scriptures, but also the new things that he was teaching that is now recorded for us in the New Testament scriptures. And that's why a lot of the parables that Jesus taught have some fresh insights for us about the kingdom of God. So in Matthew 13, he talks about the parable of the sower. He talks about the parable of the wheat and the weeds. He talks about the parable of the mustard seed, the parable of leaven, the parable of the hidden treasure, and the pearl of great price. He talks about the parable of a dragnet. And all of these things are teachings that give us glimpses or insight into the principles that are at work in the kingdom of God. So a couple of them, very brief, I just want to share with you for this evening is this, the parable of the hidden treasure. So Matthew chapter 13, verse 44. "Again, the kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and hid, and for joy over it goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant seeking beautiful pearls, who, when he found one pearl of great price, or in other words, great value, went out and sold all that he had and bought it." Now, both of those parables speak of a couple of things. It speaks of one who is seeking the kingdom of God in both places, because one is out looking at a field and perhaps seeking the right kind of property to buy. And as they're looking for that property, they discover on that property some type of treasure. Now, today, in our way of thinking, it would be someone that's looking at a piece of land, and as they're examining the property, they realize that there is some valuable minerals that are on that property. Maybe it's oil, maybe it's some other type of valuable mineral. And so when they purchase the property, they are willing to sell everything they currently have in order to pay the purchase price for that field and also get the mineral rights to it. Because though it's hidden from most people, they know it's there and they know it's worth selling all that they have because of what they're going to gain from it. Well, that certainly is a good analogy or metaphor for the kingdom of heaven. When we begin to understand all of the wealth and the blessing that comes from being in the kingdom of God, why would we not be willing to leave it all and to let go of all of that in order to embrace the kingdom of God and the ways of Christ. It's one of the reasons that Jesus challenged some people that were holding on to their earthly possessions and saying, unless you're willing to lose all of that, you can't enter into the kingdom of heaven. So we can't hold on to two kingdoms at once. We have to be willing to let go of one to embrace the other. And then the other one, of course, is the pearl. It's been called the pearl of great price. And that is talking about a merchant who is looking to get the most valuable pearl that they can find. And it's interesting that Jesus used a pearl rather than a piece of gold or a piece of jewelry or a diamond or whatever. A pearl is something that's formed organically. It is something that can't be improved on by mankind. Just whatever is formed in that oyster shell is what makes it have its beauty and its luster. And so when we think of the kingdom of God, there's nothing we can do to improve upon it. It is beautiful in all that God has provided for us. And when we understand the value and the beauty of the kingdom of God, we ought to be willing to let go of all the things that we have in this earth that would pull at us and draw our attention and our attraction in order to have that great, wonderful pearl of the kingdom of God. Now, here's the other part to both of those parables, though. And there's another way of thinking about those two parables. We often look at it as the treasure and the pearl is the kingdom of God. But what if it were flipped? And let's think it this way, because we know we can't buy our way into the kingdom of God. It has to be trusting in the King who paid it all for us. So let's flip that and think of it this way. What if the treasure in that field is you and I as God's creation, and the one who finds the field is Jesus. And of course, he knows that we're in the field of the world, and he was willing to give his life in order to have ownership of us. In other words, he knew the value, the potential in every single one of us, and so he was willing to give his very life and then conquer death and rise again, that he might have us in his kingdom and that we would desire to be in his kingdom. Or think of the pearl of great price. What if you and I were the pearl? What if you were that pearl? And Jesus looked at you and he said, I see the potential in that pearl, and I'm willing to give it all to have that pearl in my possession. Jesus gave his life on the cross of Calvary for you and for me. He died so that we might live, and he conquered death and rose again. So again, through his life, death, and resurrection, he, in a sense, was purchasing us spiritually through his perfect and holy righteousness and his just character, so that he could possess us and make us beautiful. So another way of looking at that parable, and either way, I believe it fits. It's talking about how precious we are to God and how precious God ought to be to us and his son, Jesus Christ. So I hope that you'll think about these things, about the wonderful nature of the kingdom of God, and that you'll want to be part of it. And that's what I'm going to be speaking on this Sunday morning at Porterfield, as I talk about the two aspects of the kingdom of God, both the physical aspect of the kingdom and the spiritual aspect of the kingdom. There's the external kingdom of God and the internal kingdom of God. And that's what I'm going to be speaking on this Sunday morning. So I hope that you will be able to either join us in person or watch us online through Facebook or our PBC Exchange website, our YouTube channel. So be thinking on this. And most of all, remember what Jesus said, that we are to seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And that means no matter what else we're involved in politically or with our careers or our families, all of those things are relevant in our lives, but the most important and eternal thing that has eternal relevance is the kingdom of God. God bless you.